hopefully people will join.
Do we run the event? Did we say that they would have access to the recording when it was finished?
Yeah.
So we'd run through the event and give them the recording, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I'm seeing Alex as an attendee. Alex is, you're the AV guy, correct? Just wanted to make sure. Okay. All right, as attendees are rolling in, we welcome you. Thank you for joining. We will get started momentarily. We'll give everybody just a minute to join and we'll get started. But thank you for jumping on. For those of you who are dialing in right now, thank you for being on. We're going to give attendees just a minute to join and we will get started. So thank you for being with us. Get my pre-event pump up monster drink going. We'll give it another couple minutes. It's good to see some friendly names joining. We welcome everybody who's dialing in right now. Thank you for being on with us. We're just giving, as attendees roll in, we're just giving them a minute before we get started. So thank you for being on with us. It's good to see you, Stanley. Okay, let's give it 30 more seconds, Darren, and we'll get ready. Start doing your warm-ups.
I'm warm, Mike.
Good,
I already did my warm-ups. Jumping around,
good,
exercising.
excellent. Well, people are still rolling, so we're going to go ahead and get started. But thank you to everybody who has joined. We're excited for this discussion today. Today we're going to be talking about public key infrastructure, particularly as it relates to medical devices and those in the healthcare industry. Digicert has spent a lot of time consulting and working with and deploying solutions to customers in this space. And from time to time, we like to just pause and reflect and share some of the trends and challenges that we see our customers facing and talk about how we're overcoming those challenges. And we do that in a way, we do that with the intent of educating and helping our customers and prospects to think about PKI in a healthy way, make sure that they're doing things the right way. And so our intent today is, of course, to highlight some of the cool work that we've done in the space, but also to talk talk about the challenges and trends so that you can have your eyes wide open as you're going about these. By way of introduction, my name is Mike Nelson. I'm Vice President of IoT Security at Digicert. I've spent 15 years before Digicert in the healthcare field, both on the regulatory front with the Department of Health and Human Services, but then spent 6 years with GE Healthcare and then some consulting, and then I came to GE or to Digicert. So I say frequently that next to my family, healthcare is my first love. We do a lot of work in this space and we're proud of it. Darren, you want to give a quick introduction?
Yeah, this is Darren Andrew. I'm Chief Pki Solutions Architect at Digicert. I also am Director of Product for our IoT solutions. I've been with Digicert for 10 years, and most of that time has been focused on solving PKI needs for IoT companies. I'm excited to be on the call here. Mike and I have been working closely together with his in the time that he's been at Digicert, and a lot of that IoT focus has been on the medical space, on medical devices as they're becoming more and more connected. That there are certain challenges there that PKI meets the needs for.
Absolutely, thank you, Darren. So let's establish some ground rules. In the invite that was sent to you for this, we said we wanted these events to be interactive. We want your feedback. We want to know what you're thinking. We want to know if the things that we're saying resonate with you. So we're going to be doing some engagement with you. We're going to be doing live polling, and we want you to respond. It will help us, and we hope that the results of those polls will help you as well. We commit to you that we will not share your identity as we share the results. So others on the call will not know what your answers are, but we will roll those answers up and share general percentages of those who have responded so that you can see kind of trends and what others who are on with you today are thinking. So as I said, we'll be doing live polling. We're going to actually jumpstart once we get through this in the agenda. We're going to do a couple rounds of polling. And then finally, the other thing about engagement is there's a chat section. We're all familiar with Zoom. We've been doing plenty of it the last year. You can use the chat feature to message Darren and I, or you can do the Q&A. If you have questions as we're going through things, if you have questions, even if you just have comments, we'd love to hear your comments and we'd love to incorporate those into this discussion. The more comments, the more questions, the better. We really want engagement because we want this to be beneficial. If there are things you want us to talk about or to address, please bring it up. That's what this is for. We also promised at the invitation that we're going to be offering an incentive. Digicert has actually never done this before, and we're excited We're going to be showing you some really cool new features that Digicert and partnerships that Digicert has put together recently, and we're really excited. Some of these have been put together based on the requests of our customers in healthcare. So we want you to get your hands on it. And to thank you for attending the event today, we're offering a 2-month free trial with support. We have award-winning support, and they're there to hold your hand through this, where you can test the technology, you can test provisioning, you can test revocation, you can test device management, you can see all the bells and whistles of our flagship product. And then we're also doing an additional incentive where we're waiving startup costs for root creation and an issuing CA or an ICA, just to help kind of get you going and get things started. If you're an existing customer, that would be an additional ICA. So if you're looking to roll into a new business unit within your organization, that free ICA would be part of that offering, and also the trial. So it works for both customers and non-customers. Anyways, we're excited about that. So from an agenda perspective, just really quickly kind of set the stage. We're going to start by talking about the industry in general, the current state of medical device security, where things are. We'll highlight on the regulatory front some things that are going on related to cybersecurity, both internationally and also some of the things that the FDA did early to get things going from an international standpoint. We're then going to jump in and talk about emerging trends in PKI. And I think this is a really interesting aspect of the discussion because, I think trends tell you what the industry is thinking. And we're having enough conversations that we're starting to see some emerging trends and themes that are going on. We want to share those and get your feedback on them. And then we're going to turn it over to Darren, and we're going to highlight some of the common challenges and ways that we're addressing those through technology and also through partnership that we're really excited about. So our goal is to be done in about an hour and a half, maybe a couple minutes past that. We'll move as quickly as we need to, but again, we want it to be interactive. So please don't hesitate. Even if you just want to tell Darren how nicely his shirt is pressed this morning, please don't hesitate. We want your comments, we want your feedback, we want this interactive. We really value your feedback, and hope you'll get on and engage with us in that way. All right. Anything else, Darren, before we get rolling?
Oh, sounds good, Mike.
Okay, let's jump into it. So let's start the polling. If we could have our AV team please launch the first poll, we'll ask you to respond. We're going to start by asking about your biggest challenges around PKI with medical devices. If you please take a minute and respond. Don't be shy. Awesome. Wow. That is the first 100% we have seen. Give it another minute. Okay, let's share those results. That's really interesting. That's a really high percentage. Yeah, so this is common. We have done events like this in different regions of the world. We've done them through the US and APAC, and this has commonly been a consistent answer. We haven't seen 100%. This is the first time we've seen that. But I think in healthcare, the environments in which devices operate make certificate management a real challenge. And so today we'll be talking about some of the certificate management capabilities that we have brought to the table that allows you to do better management of not just certificates, but of devices, which is really important. Awesome. All right, let's go to the next one. Poll number 2, please. What security challenge are you using PKI for currently? Authentication, integrity, encryption, or all the above? And I will say this is one where we have seen 100% in the past. Let's see. All right, if you go ahead and respond. If you don't know, quickly ping your boss. All right, good. Okay, we'll give it another minute. Couple more seconds. Excellent. If we could publish those. Yeah, so this is interesting. We've actually seen in our other events a higher percentage of all the above, but I think authentication has typically been the starting point for PKI. And so where we do not see all the above, authentication is usually the starting point. So we have 67% of attendees today leveraging authentication, and then 33% leveraging all the above. Interesting. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. I think one of the uses that is beginning to pick up, and I'll talk about this in a minute, is integrity, because of some of the regulatory language around code integrity, device integrity, things like that. All right, let's go to the next one. Poll question number 3, please. If we could launch that. All right. How many PKI certificates are you currently managing? If you don't know, guess or quickly ping someone. Okay, we'll give it a couple more seconds. Get your vote in. All right, let's wrap that up. Yeah, so again, I think we see a mixed bag here. Mature organizations and organizations that are just getting underway. So we have 50% that are under 1,000, and then 50% that are 100,000 plus. Quite different universes there as the complexity of that challenge of managing increases. And then finally, let's do poll question number 4. And this is about your anticipated growth. Do you see your PKI, how quickly do you anticipate it growing? Remain the same over the next 3 years? Moderate growth, doubling in growth, or triple? Please quickly respond. Couple more seconds.
I wonder on this one if some of it is just the design for usages are doubling or tripling or improving that way. Like designs, actual implementation takes time.
Yeah, so let's publish those results. That's good. 50% and 50% moderate to double, which I think is what we'd expect. And as Darren points out, you may be in the design of those, which means in 2 to 3 years, those products may get to market. In healthcare, products don't go to market rapidly. They take design, they take regulatory approval. We see anywhere from a 2 to 5 year life cycle from design to actual production. And so things don't move that quickly. And while your organization may have in the design process right now a lot of software enabled products, it's going to take some time to get those to market. But we do see an increase. We do see, and we're helping many more organizations right now kind of design architecture, making sure that they're doing things the right way. All right, thank you. Thank you for your good engagement on that. Let's continue. So let's jump into the existing state, where we are today. The last year, I think, has thrown some curveballs at the healthcare industry. And I think in general, globally, the industry has done a pretty good job of adapting to everything moving to the home environment. But I think what we have seen is in the last year, a dramatic increase in connectivity. And that's not just within the walls of an HDO. Connectivity has expanded externally. We've seen much more care be enabled from the home, more connected devices, more monitoring devices, more telehealth visits. We have asked HDOs that have traditionally been struggling to secure the walls of their hospital and the networks within their hospital to expand that network to the home. And that increase in connectivity has increased the complexity dramatically. And, you know, I think that I would say a year and a half ago, before COVID hit, that one of the big concerns in the industry was complexity of hospital networks and the challenge of securing the variety of devices that operate in a healthcare system. We've now asked them to secure the home environment as well. You know, telehealth patient visits, more connected devices, monitoring patients at home. And so the complexity has gone up and the threats have not gone away. Healthcare continues to be at the top of industries that are targeted by cyber actors, by threat actors. And because of that, you know, I anticipate and I project that we will see in the coming years some exploits that happen because in a rush to get these systems up, some important protections may have been overlooked. I had a particular experience, I'm a type 1 diabetic, with my endocrinologist, where I had a telehealth visit, and I can tell you the protocol and the way it went about, while their intentions were good, I can tell you that the security approach and things that happened probably should not have happened. And I think that the industry has, I think in the scramble to get things up, they moved quickly. I believe that those systems now are improving and telehealth will continue. More home monitoring devices will continue to be used, and hopefully the vulnerabilities and some of those blind spots that they had are being closed up. But I do think that we will see some attacks from some of those systems that got stood up too quickly. Additionally, the industry, talking about complexity, one of the complexities for healthcare is just the sheer number of stakeholders that operate. You have medical device manufacturers, you have HDOs, both large hospital systems and small clinics, regulators, insurance providers, pharma, research, security researchers, and security vendors. Cybersecurity has to be a shared responsibility. And when you have this many stakeholders playing in an industry, the complexity of solving cyber becomes more challenging. It requires these groups working together to make sure systems are integrating in a secure way. And that's been a challenge. Traditionally, I think we've seen a lot of what you see on the left side of this slide. Finger pointing, it's not my responsibility, it's the HDOs, or the HDOs saying, I need my devices to be more secure when they're sent to the hospital. Finger pointing is continuing. An unwillingness to take recommendations from medical device manufacturers continues to be a challenge, or just a complete lack of responsiveness. But what is needed is more collaboration, as I said. The International Medical Device Regulatory Forum, or IMDRF, in the Principles and Practices for Medical Device Security, highlights the need for shared responsibility. They talk about stakeholders, including manufacturer, healthcare provider, users, regulators, and those that find the vulnerabilities to work collaboratively. It goes on to say they need to sit down to understand the vulnerabilities of devices and to make sure that mitigation is put in place to ensure the security of devices. The FDA has also had a very strong push driving MDMs, security researchers, HDOs, and other stakeholders to work collaboratively to solve cybersecurity. And I do believe that we've seen dramatic improvement in the collaboration space, but it needs to continue. Now looking more at the actual regulatory front and what we're seeing, we still don't see regulatory mandates. What we see is guidance documents suggesting and encouraging manufacturers to follow certain security best practices. IMDRF published their principles and practices for handling cybersecurity in the medical device space. This slide here shows an extract of the principles. On the left hand of the slide, they highlight 7 principles that need to be implemented for handling cybersecurity. Those principles are secure communication, protection of data, device integrity, user authentication, software maintenance, physical access, and reliability and availability of the device. Those are pretty foundational approaches to cybersecurity. On the right-hand side are the security best practices that they recommend implementing to address those principles. The next slide here shows why PKI is so important in this setting. Public key infrastructure is a great starting point for cybersecurity because it allows organizations to address multiple best practices. Mutual authentication can be enabled through the use of digital certificates. Data encryption, secure key management is an important component of good PKI. Secure boot, using digital signatures to sign a boot file. Code signing, again, digital signatures to sign code to ensure integrity. Multi-factor authentication, certificates can be used as one of the factors for authentication. And then secure update capability. If you're sending a firmware update, making sure that that packet is signed digitally to ensure the integrity of that packet. PKI is a great starting point because it allows you to check a lot of boxes when it comes to security best practices. The Food and Drug Administration, this slide looks similar, but it's an extract from the FDA Pre-Market Guidance. Again, here, the FDA guidance is broken into two different sections. On the left-hand side, it's identify and protect the device. And then below that, you see all the security best practices that the FDA recommends using to identify and protect the device. The other section is detect, respond, and recovering from cyber incidents. And then you have a list of security best practices that the FDA is encouraging manufacturers to follow. Again, these security best practices, user authentication, multi-factor authentication, encryption, any of those security best practices are really not rocket science if you're in the cyberspace. They're starting points. They're things that you should be doing. A regulator should not have to ask you to encrypt confidential data. But it's the starting point. It's what the FDA and it's what IMDRF is encouraging manufacturers to follow. To do what we did with IMDRF with the FDA guidance, the boxes here in light blue indicate the security practices that can be accomplished with PKI. Today we're looking at security through the lens of PKI, and so I want to ground our discussion in that because you guys joined our event today knowing that we'd be talking about PKI, and I think it's important to highlight the reason why so many manufacturers right now are turning to public key infrastructure. So now let's jump into emerging trends and what we are seeing as Digicert through the lens of PKI in healthcare. The first trend that we are seeing is a centralization of Pki. When I joined Digicert about 6 years ago, I would say that PKI was the wild, wild west in medical device security. You had product security teams that were starting to be stood up at a corporate level, but the PKI deployments that they had, they really didn't know how many, they didn't know what standards or algorithms they were using. It was kind of the wild, wild west. And what we're seeing today is more of a centralized approach. We see large organizations harmonizing their practice across their organization. And they do this in a way to control and make sure that the product teams are doing PKI the right way. They do it to save money because consolidation and harmonization actually does create more efficiency, but it also creates greater visibility to give product security teams the ability to see how many certificates have been deployed, what's the current state of the number of certificates, when do they expire, do we have good management around those, and to make sure that they're unifying and harmonizing the practices across their organization. Having said that, I want to pause and launch the next poll. If we could launch poll question number 5, please. We have a mix today of both HDOs and medical device manufacturers. So the question here is, does your product security team leave PKI decisions to each product team, or do they centralize and standardize across your organization?
Yeah, when we talk to IoT companies and medical device manufacturers, say 5 to 10 years ago, the individuals we spoke with, they would say things like, "You're preaching to the choir, but I don't have any real authority to make any changes. I know that we should adopt some of these things for integrity, confidentiality, and encryption." They were working through that at the pace that they could. But we've seen a definite uptick in companies really taking these things seriously, and the cybersecurity professionals at the companies getting a lot more time with the C-level groups to explain that this is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say that so the results of that of the poll are 100% responded leaving PKI decisions to each product team. Now, what I want to emphasize with this, and this is common, is a lot of times the product teams don't even know if it's centralized. We see a lot of we see a lot of movement in this space. But one of the challenges of centralizing is educating and promoting the PKI. I did a webinar with Edison Alvarez from Beck & Dickinson several months back, and the webinar was about centralizing PKI. And BD shared with the audience the reasons why they're centralizing and the challenges. And one of the challenges was education, awareness, and enablement. And they've leaned on us to enable and to train and to reach out to their product teams in collaboration with the centralized team. But it's a challenge. And a centralized approach without education is a failed approach. If your product teams don't know about it, then they can't leverage it. And so it's really important. We encourage all of you on here today who are in the process of doing that to make sure that you are not just centralizing and getting a good infrastructure stood up, but that you're doing the right things around enablement and training. All right, we had
there was a question. Yeah. There's an open question here. I'd like to address it right now. It's about whether customers are using. So it goes back to one of the previous slides about using PKI for integrity. And the question about integrity, encryption, or authentication. We do. So the question was if we see customers using PKI for signing medical reports, and we actually do. Multiple customers. One example is a diagnostics device that has assays where they diagnose based on a blood sample or other things. The results, that diagnostic result is signed so that you know that it hasn't been manipulated after it left that device, that you can trust the diagnosis. So yeah, we definitely have customers, IoT device manufacturers in the medical space that create this kind of device that signs the results of its records.
That's a great question. And that practice, I would say, Darren, that's a best practice. I would say that medical reports should be signed because they contain oftentimes confidential data, and we need to ensure the integrity of those reports and the confidentiality of them. Yeah, thank you. Great question. All right, let's continue to drive. Thank you. So the second trend is around digital signatures. So we just talked about signing medical reports. I think another trend that we are seeing is a dramatic uptick in leveraging digital signatures, and that really is for code integrity. So as more software-enabled devices are put out in the field, remote updates are a part of all regulatory guidance language, making sure that firmware packets have integrity associated with them. If reports are being generated or data is being generated by a device, making sure you have data integrity and confidentiality. But then also execution integrity. The FDA guidance specifically mentions execution integrity, so does IMDRF. It mentions making sure that devices are operating in a secure and trusted state, that configuration settings haven't been manipulated. So you can do things like a boot file, and you can sign those. But we've seen a dramatic increase in digital signatures being used to ensure integrity. The third trend we are seeing is what we call certificate policies, or CP, and CPS, or certificate practice statement documents. These documents really are governance documents that dictate how a PKI in an organization is to be used. It articulates the many different uses, whether that be for connected devices, whether that be for enterprise, whether that be for signing. It talks about the ways in which the PKI is used, and then it dictates appropriate use, revocation policies, renewal policies. It goes through and it articulates policies around all of those. And so looking back on number one, where you're centralizing your PKI, one of the first things you need to do is make sure that you have the right governance documents in place to governance the use of the PKI as you roll it out. The webinar that we did with BD, they shared that they have 148-ish software-enabled products. You can think about the challenge of enforcing your PKI with all of those teams. This is where having a governance document that you can share with the teams, they can follow the regulation, or they can follow the language in that, is much easier than being on the hook to train and to talk with each of those teams about the policies that you want to enforce. And so we have seen, I think, a really positive movement with more organizations putting CP, CPS documents in place. Any comments on that, Darren?
I think that's exactly right, Mike. There's a major challenge when you leave the adoption of PKI just to each individual product group without guidance. Then you really have to kind of wonder whether they have the expertise in each product group to make the right decisions. If there is a centralized location where we have this governance document, everyone can work to improve it, and you learn from each team. So that's something that we've seen. We've seen more success in adopting PKI and improving cybersecurity in general when you have these centralized governance documents.
Yeah, there's a good question that came in around what is how do you generate a CP? So there are templates that can be used. CP has common sections that need to be filled out. Digicert can help you. We, for many of our customers, help write and guide the development of these documents, but it needs to be done. You need to follow, make sure that all of the sections are adequately filled out and completed. But the template itself is a really good blueprint for getting all of the governance policies in place. And we'd be happy to share those and have that conversation with anybody who has interest. All right, moving on. The next trend is cloud and on-premise. So, I think a couple of years ago, what we saw was organizations trying to figure out whether they were a cloud organization or they wanted zero trust on-premise type deployments of PKI. And while that's not a bad approach, the truth is you can deploy both. And I think what we've seen here, and this trend is meant to emphasize, is that I think there's a maturity in thinking here. I think organizations are beginning to realize they may have some manufacturing plants that need to be a closed environment and they want an on-premise CA there, and they have some that may have cloud enablement and they can leverage the cloud for their CA needs. And so the trend that we see here is organizations more commonly using both types of deployments. And Digicert, of course, can help, and we have flexibility in our deployment options. We can do both cloud, we can do hybrid, or we can do on-premise. But I think the maturing that we're seeing in healthcare around this is a definite maturing. The next trend is around in-country deployments, and I call this the China problem. And what we have seen here in the trend is we have been asked by a lot of medical device manufacturers to help them solve this challenge. And the challenge is where you have a root CA operating in a country where the government can have access to the root. And so if you have a root that is provisioning certificates and ICAs, and the government asks and gains access to that, they could gain access to all of the credentials throughout your organization. And so we have worked with organizations, and for some reason, the last 3 months, we've been asked this by a handful of different medical device manufacturers, but how do you solve that? And really, there are a handful of different options and ways that you can do that, including on-premise. There are other ways that you can do it with secure tokens and things like that. But we see organizations in healthcare trying to solve PKI in countries where they have that challenge of wanting to protect the root and not having it impact all the other deployments that may be external to that country. Finally, the last trend is around, and again, I think this is a maturity of the industry, but provisioning options. I think when we began down the path of medical device IoT 6 years ago, most organizations were really trying to figure out how to deploy to devices in the field. Legacy was a big issue. And we still work with organizations to solve legacy. But I think we're beginning to see a maturity around, hey, let's start thinking about the products in development, and let's start thinking about how we can provision certificates to devices, not just in the field, but maybe at the point of manufacturing. And we've seen a dramatic increase in that over the last 3 years. But even more recently, around thinking about certificates in the supply chain. And Darren's going to talk about a partnership we have with Aero Electronics about pre-provisioning security credentials to microcontrollers before they even get to your manufacturing line. It brings a lot of efficiency to your manufacturing process, and we have seen an increase of attention of manufacturers looking to solve that challenge, and we're excited from the maturity that we're seeing in that space as well. So that rounds out the discussion around trends. I hope that that's helpful. The intent of sharing that is to help you be aware of what other organizations are doing in healthcare, particularly related to medical devices, and maybe help you realize that some of the challenges you're dealing with, other organizations are dealing with as well. If we could launch polling question number 6, I should have done this one earlier. It's about CP/CPS documents. But I'm curious to know, we don't need to share the results of this one, but I'm just curious to know how many of you on here have or are aware of your organization's CP or CPS documents. I'll let you respond. We don't need to share the results of this. I'll maybe share it generally, but give you another minute to respond. Good. All right, we'll close that down. I'll just say that a high percentage of those that were on do have CP documents in place, which is a really good thing. All right. Having said that, I now am going to turn it over to my colleague Darren to walk through challenges and solutions, common challenges that we've heard from our customers in the medical device space and ways that we're going about solving those. But I want to say that Digicert has, before I do, I want to say Digicert has really been through a great evolution in the product space. When I joined Digicert over 6 years ago, we had the robust Cert Central platform. We had strong certificate management, but we didn't have everything that we needed. As we started talking to prospects in the medical device space, we realized that we needed to add more functionality. We needed to help them solve more challenges. Over the last couple of years, we have released our Digicert One flagship product, which is a single pane of glass to access all of our tools, whether that be public SSL, whether that be enterprise use cases, whether that be document signing or code signing, or IoT, which we're going to focus on today. The Digicert One platform is the most modern PKI platform on the market. And what we're going to show today is the IoT device manager and the features that we have built that allow and are helping medical device manufacturers to overcome some of the common challenges. We're really proud, we're really excited about this platform. Darren, as he said, is the brains behind this. And I don't think there's anyone on the planet who's had more discussions about PKI in healthcare than Darren Andrew. We've worked with the biggest organizations, we've worked with small startups, and help them address the challenges that they're experiencing. And I'm really excited to kick it over to Darren and have him walk you through this. All right, Darren, I'm going to stop sharing and give control over to you.
All right, thanks a lot, Mike. All right, I'll share my screen. So the what we're trying to accomplish is working together with medical device manufacturers to improve devices and improve the cybersecurity of devices. And in general, we're helping to design medical devices that are worthy of our trust. So if we look at a topic that Mike had touched on earlier, there's some combination of authentication, encryption, and integrity that that the combination of this mitigates risk and improves cybersecurity, and it helps in that design of designing medical devices that are worthy of our trust. And one of the interesting things that we've seen that trend from just focusing on legacy devices and thinking you could just strap on a feature, you could strap on security as a feature in the legacy device. It's actually very complicated, and it's actually security is more of a property of a device which emerges as part of a good design. So we see more success in the design phase to both adopt PKI, but just improve device cybersecurity in general. That is, if it's designed well, then that property security emerges. So if we look at this platform that Digicert has been creating, this platform has many different managers in it. You can see this list at the top of the diagram. It has Enterprise PKI Manager, IoT Device Manager, Cert Central, Secure Software Manager, and a Digital Signing Manager. And all these managers are built in a way where they refer back to a central, or they use a central type of service where we have account manager and CA manager as that central service. The beauty of this platform is that we've built this in a way where it all kind of comes as a package, and you get all these workflows out of these managers, out of Enterprise PKI Manager, IoT Device Manager, Secure Software Manager. You get all these workflows in a package that comes. And one of the really big challenges that we had seen is that PKI had always been viewed as a cloud service, that if you want a strong vendor of PKI that has been doing it for 20 years, then their services were mostly in the cloud. And what we've done with this, let me show you the next slide here. We're using Docker containers, and if you just deploy a Docker engine on a virtual machine, you can deploy Digicert 1 in a matter of minutes. So we've seen customers deploy this in under an hour. The amount of effort, the amount of time to deploy this full platform, and I'm going to go back to this previous diagram. All these managers, all these workflows, and protections of keys, the signing that can happen through this platform, managing revocation and CRLs and OCSP. You get all this through this rapid deployment because it's a cloud native architecture. We use Kubernetes as a orchestration platform. So we're able to deploy this into countries. But one of the things that Mike mentioned was in-country deployments where you need to protect keys and deploy PKI in a country, or on-prem. So maybe on a manufacturing line where you need to have an issuing CA and all these workflows supported on-prem and within a network. So this is what we're really excited about. We're really excited to provide PKI in more flexible ways so that the adoption of PKI is not as difficult, and we could remove some of the roadblocks for adopting PKI. So the previous slide, we talked a little bit about why we'd be using PKI for integrity, for encryption, for authentication. Here, we see that we can use PKI, or PKI is commonly used for devices, for services, and for code. And when we talk about devices, a lot of times we talk about a birth certificate that is issued at the time of manufacture. We really like, what we've seen is the designs for use of PKI. You want to get a certificate on that device as early as possible, some kind of strong identity on that device, at least at the time of manufacture. And we'll talk about issuing certificates to the parts before they're even assembled. So you have birth certificates and operational certificates. For services, most of the time we're talking about TLS certificate for authenticating the service and for encrypting the session. And when we're talking about PKI used in code, a lot of times what we're talking about is a code signing certificate and verifying signature on the code. The first step in deploying a PKI is having a root, and that root certificate, that public key of the root certificate, needs to be deployed into the device. So this could be your trusted root store within the device. It may be that this is a part of your firmware when you first write firmware to a device, and you're including that root public key. So it's so important to do that because as the device connects to services, to other devices, or receives software updates, it's going to use the public key of that root CA to verify the service, the device, or the software that it's encountering in the wild. So with root being such an important first step, or such an important aspect to this, the ways that Digicert have helped with the root, with managing a root, is also our flexibility in options for root management. It could be that a customer really kind of has the expertise and wants to manage their own route. They want to have that route offline in an HSM that they control, that's within their own secure environment, and we support that 100%. That's perfectly fine. Other options are Digicert hosted options, where it's a dedicated route and the route is offline. We have our trained staff that keeps that HSM offline, and anytime it's needed, we bring it into an offline environment and use it during key ceremonies. And then another option is a shared HSM, and in that case, there's one kind of drawback to a shared HSM, and that is that the HSM could not be transferred to the owner of that route. So the route would have to remain within Digicert's environment. If it's a dedicated HSM that Digicert's hosting on the medical device manufacturer's behalf, then we can transfer that sometime in the future. That whole HSM can be transferred to the medical device manufacturer.
Hey, Darren, there's a question here about related to healthcare. Which of these is most common?
That's a great question. The most common adoption here is the hosted dedicated HSM. So Digicert has all of our policy in place. We train the staff, our PKI operations team. That's a team that is well staffed with individuals that have years of experience in PKI. And so that's the option that's most common, that dedicated HSM is purchased just for that medical device manufacturer. It's set up offline, and the route is managed on your behalf, on behalf of the medical device manufacturer. It's managed by Digicert. So the next major step in this process is having issuing CAs or having intermediates, creating a hierarchy, some kind of a certificate authority hierarchy. And this is the most common scenario right here, where it involves a key ceremony. So I'm going to quickly touch on this because it is the most common. And I'm going to move on to a less common use case that we're excited to offer, but it is somewhat less common. So this first use case, this would involve you and Digicert, or a medical device manufacturer and Digicert, agreeing upon the fact that a new intermediate or CA needs to be generated. So it needs to be created. And we agree upon the details of that CA, and a key pair is generated. The Digicert PKI operations team signs that certificate in an offline way. So we have that root ceremony. It's done in a very process guided way. So you have a process that we follow, and it's auditable. And this is a actual physical key ceremony. People are involved in this ceremony, and policy is adhered to. In the next slide, I'm going to show, and I've just changed to the next slide. In this slide, we're excited to offer this because that process heavy workflow of a key ceremony, that does meet most needs for creating hierarchies. But we have found that there are certain use cases where an issuing CA needs to be generated for particular networks. And in the design of the medical device manufacturer, there may be some medical device that's on-prem at a customer site, and that on-prem medical device is responsible for enrolling other devices into a trust framework, and those other devices need certificates. And so then if that is the case, and you need thousands of issuing CAs for each one of these customer networks, then there needs to be an automation around it. That process heavy key ceremony type workflow, that doesn't really fit this model when you need to have maybe 100 issuing CAs issued in a week, and need it maybe within seconds. Maybe you need the issuing CA issued within seconds or minutes. So in this case, go ahead.
Darren, just quickly, a good question. I think you're going to get there, but just to make sure, what would a use case be for a medical device manufacturer that would need automated CA creation or signing is the question. I think you're gonna touch on that, specifically related to healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. In one case, let me get very specific. In one case, there was a medical device that had that was within a network, so no outbound connectivity is allowed from this medical device, and it is a large medical device that had capability of making connections with other devices, or the other devices were connecting into it. And there was an enrollment step. So devices were being enrolled to connect to this larger medical device. The device, they wanted to have mutual TLS. So between this device and the other devices, they wanted to have mutual TLS. And at the moment of enrollment, the devices were receiving a certificate from a dedicated issuing CA. So that each site had a dedicated issuing CA that needed to be used within that network, within the network. So this larger medical device that all the other devices enrolled to, they all needed a certificate issued to them. So in that case, that larger medical device needed to issue the certificates to these other devices that were enrolling. And that's one use case of a CA needing to be issued to each one of these larger medical devices, so that it could use that CA to issue certificates out to these other devices enrolling to it. Now, that's just one example. In healthcare, it's that example where you have an issuance design, a design for issuance, where the CAs need to be on-prem so that they could issue certificates to other devices. That's the use case. It's uncommon. Let me just state that this is not a very common use case. Most of the time, certificate issuance happens through a process where a device is enrolling outside of that network. It could be through a gateway. So it could be that the devices are not having direct outbound access, but they do have the ability to make requests to a gateway, and then the gateway is allowed outbound access to fulfill those certificate requests. Now, in this case, we were able to automate the CA issuance, and what happens is within the Digicert One platform, you set it up so that a CA, that an intermediate, is allowed to sign sub CAs or issuing CAs through an automated process. And it's done through an API endpoint. So the API endpoint has to be configured for that particular account, and a user with credentials has to configure a credential to be used for making these requests. So there's a lot of kind of upfront setup, and there's controls around that within the platform for selecting which intermediate is going to sign these issuing CAs. And then once it's all set up and the credential is set up within the code to make requests through an API endpoint, then CA requests can be fulfilled in an automated way.
Yeah, I think this just, again, emphasizes the flexibility of the platform, and the fact also, I know particular customer of ours in the medical space had requested the automated issuance so that these things can happen fast. But we've also deployed this in a lot of different ecosystems. In automotive, we have a customer who is putting an ICA within each vehicle to provision certificates to the different ECUs within the vehicle. And so there are a lot of different environments in which this makes sense. But again, flexibility, our ability to come help you solve not just traditional ICA issues, but the need for automation in this space. And we're excited about that.
Right. Yep. All right, so let's get into certificate provisioning options. We've spoken of the root, we've spoken of the CA generation, and the new option that we have with that to be an automated process. Provisioning of certificates to the devices and ongoing lifecycle of those certificates is important. The first place where we've worked out the ability to provision certificates is before the devices are assembled. So provisioning to parts before they're assembled. Then another major area that can be where you can adopt provisioning is at manufacture. And then finally, we come to when the devices are operational. So certificate issuance at a time when devices are in use. So, and really, we're not saying do one of these things or that you can only adopt one, and that the right solution is always going to be one of these kind of areas. What we'd say is become familiar with all of these areas. Know that you can provision certificates before a device is assembled. Know that you can provision at manufacturer, and also that it's important to have operational certificates that are provisioned at time of the device being operational, so that you would adopt a combination of these possibly to improve the cybersecurity of a device. The first one here that we're very excited about, we've worked very hard with Arrow Electronics to deliver this option to medical device manufacturers. There's a lot of work on Arrow's side and on Digicert's side to provide this to IoT companies. And really the part that we've worked out with Arrow Electronics streamlines this for a company's manufacturing process. So the first step, Arrow Electronics is a distributor of electronics globally, and one of the things that one of the key parts that plays a part in this design is that they distribute chips like Infineon chips, Renesas chips, these either secure chips or microcontroller units, MCUs. There's a capability to program firmware to them, and also provision a certificate to them. And what Arrow Electronics has done with us is that there's an opportunity to provision a certificate to the chip before it's shipped to the manufacturing line. So it can be as simple as you order a batch of chips from Arrow Electronics. You may provide a firmware to them that you would like provision to the chip, as well as a certificate that should be provisioned to the chip. And so Arrow Electronics takes each chip off of a reel, puts it down into a socket in their programming device, programs it with a certificate, with any other firmware that you might need to program onto that chip, and then picks it back up out of the socket and puts it onto the other reel, and then ships that reel off to your manufacturing line. And the beauty of this is that you already have a a medical device manufacturer already has a manufacturing process. So they have some process that they have already in place. And instead of retooling and trying to come up with some way of provisioning a certificate on the manufacturing line, this is another option where Arrow Electronics and Digicert have worked out the provisioning of certificate step for you. And those certificates that have been provisioned to the devices end up in your Digicert One account. So they're imported into your Digicert One account. They're also on the chip, so that when it's assembled into the device, you already have an identity, a strong identity on that device, because the certificate was already provisioned to the chip that went into that device. So this can simplify the process of adopting PKI because you don't have to change your manufacturing line process.
Hey, Darren, there's a question from the audience on this. Is there a list of approved chips that Arrow works with?
We can help you obtain that list from Arrow Electronics. Absolutely, Arrow is adding chips to this list all the time. So there's a good chance that what you're working with is a chip that that Arrow Electronics is just a distributor for.
Awesome. Yep. We have some of the Arrow team on the call today, and they have responded also saying we can work with all programmable parts. So I think there's flexibility there. So if you have interest, please reach out and let us know. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. So and that's excellent news. The amount of effort that we've put into to work this out with Arrow Electronics, and that they can work with all programmable parts. This is helping manufacturers adopt PKI, but also there are other programming features of those programmable parts that you could take advantage of. And one thing that we'd heard, now this is why we reached out to Arrow and why we've worked so closely with Arrow Electronics. One thing that we'd heard is that if a company wanted to have, say, Infineon or Renesas make a custom program to their chip and issue a certificate to the chip, they were talking about quantities of millions. With Arrow Electronics, you might need just a proof of concept, maybe 100 chips programmed, and that could grow from there, right? All the way up into the hundreds of thousands or millions with Arrow Electronics. But the beauty of it is that at the low quantities, at the 100 chip quantity, you can still get this programming done through Arrow Electronics, and they're an excellent company to work with, even at the smaller quantities.
Exactly.
All right. So we have a polling question about this. So if we could pull that up. And this is about the possibility of adopting issuance of certificates to secure chips or microcontrollers. We'd like to gauge how maybe the efforts we put into this may pay off for you to help you adopt PKI.
Awesome.
Great.
Good response on that. We're positive. High percentages responding in the positive. Again, we're really excited about this, and I do feel like this is a mature approach for an industry. When manufacturers begin thinking about doing these things in the supply chain, it reflects maturity. It reflects that we're moving in the right direction. And I believe that there's going to be a lot of growth in this area as well. And the respondents, based on the fact that such a high percentage are responding, the results are still coming in, but I'm watching them, but real high percentage responding, yes, this is something of interest. So we're excited about that. We're excited about the partnership. Also, just a nod to our friends from Arrow. Thank you for joining this event today as well. They've been a great partner to work with on this, and we really see some great future, a great future in this. And it came from the fact, the very first conversation we had from this was a top 5 medical device manufacturer who came to us and said, we need to make our manufacturing processes more simple. We don't want to do this at the point of manufacturing. Can you help us? And so this feature and capability was grounded from that request, and many others since. All right, Darren, sorry to interrupt. Let's close that poll and keep driving.
All right. The next kind of area where provisioning is done would be at the time of manufacturing, so within a manufacturing line. And in this case, the first couple of steps are similar. So you have the setup of a certificate authority, and you would select some method for making requests for certificates. In this case, the manufacturing line needs some way to communicate with the issuing CA. So we've provided as many methods as we can for making those requests for certificates. We have our REST API, there's EST, SCEP, CMPv2. These are all options that we see as providing methods for certificate provisioning at manufacturer. The platform also supports ACME. ACME we've seen as more of a protocol for requesting certificates in web services type scenario, but it is also an enrollment method that we have available is the ACME protocol. And every one of these methods, there's always some credential. And so the combination of selecting a method for enrollment along with some credential that's going to be used to authenticate for the enrollment is important. And we've created a robust set of options for credentials as well. So just in general, they're passcodes and certificates that can be used as credentials to enroll for a certificate. But it's the options within each one of those. So maybe it's a one-time passcode, and it's being generated through an API endpoint so that it's a one-time passcode per device. Or it might be a certificate that has been issued from a certain CA, or that is a certificate that's provided to a programming PC, and it's the programming PC that is making requests for certificates on behalf of the device. So there's a lot of credential options that we've worked into the platform to solve for having a authentication step into these enrollment methods. So then ultimately what you want is all certificates that have been issued to devices for them to show up and be managed within the Digicert One platform in your account, in the device manufacturer account. So then if we look at what we've been working on, this is an example of 3 manufacturing lines. So in this diagram, I have 3 manufacturing lines represented by the robot there. And then on the left-hand side, I have the Digicert One cloud. So Digicert One in the cloud. On the bottommost example of a manufacturing line, we have the programming PC that's involved in the request for a certificate, and we have the device directly requesting certificates. And as you can see, one valid option is that they reach out through the cloud to a Digicert One instance that's hosted in the cloud. So this requires outbound connectivity outside of the manufacturing line. Another thing we're very excited about, because of Digicert 1 being deployed on-prem because of the cloud native architecture of Digicert 1, you can set it up within a manufacturing line, and with you being able to deploy it in minutes, because of the architecture, you can do this now. You can install Digicert 1 and get all of its capability, all of its features, all the workflows, on-prem within the manufacturing line. So then the two top scenarios is a Digicert 1 on-prem instance where you have programming PCs making direct requests to Digicert 1 within the manufacturing line network, or you have devices directly connecting to Digicert 1 within the manufacturing network. In all of these cases, we would encourage you to also import all the certificates that have been issued on an on-prem Digicert 1 into your cloud Digicert 1. So any medical device manufacturers who adopt maybe the on-prem option, those certificates can still be managed within a central Digicert 1 cloud instance, so that everywhere in the world globally you can get to that cloud instance and view what certificates have been issued. So just because the certificates are issued on-prem from an on-prem CA, in Digicert 1's solution, we've created a way for you to import those all into your cloud instance so that you can view all the certificates that have been issued from this cloud instance from anywhere in the world.
Hey, Darren, this question is going back to the previous, and it's around device certificate management.
Yep.
Thinking about the fact that we had such a high percentage respond that certificate management is a challenge. The question is, with the previous discussion around Arrow, is certificate management and getting certificates embedded into your profile still a possibility?
Absolutely.
I think
so,
profile meaning
yeah.
account, right?
Yes,
is what they're meaning. Yeah.
I think that's important, because just now I've said you want all of your certificates managed in a cloud instance of Digicert 1, right? Because certificate issuance happens with Arrow Electronics within a secure network. The CA actually is on-prem. The issuance of those certificates happens within Arrow Electronics secure network. There is a step where those certificates are the certificates themselves, not the private keys, but the public certificate portion, those are imported into your Digicert 1 account. The CA, the issuing CA, is held both in your Digicert 1 account and at Arrow Electronics. There is a step for encrypting that issuing CA as it leaves your Digicert 1 account, and decrypting it within an HSM at Arrow Electronics, so that the key, your issuing CA key, is both managed in your Digicert 1 account as well as in the Arrow Electronics programmer. And any certificates issued by the Arrow Electronics programmer, they're imported into your Digicert 1 account, and they can be managed from your Digicert 1 account, including revocation. So revocation services can also be supported for those certificates that are imported into your Digicert 1 account. Hopefully,
yes, I think it's fair to say that all of the things that the solutions we're talking about, we enable robust certificate management and device lifecycle management as well. Exactly. Just because it's such an important component as you get, thousands, hundreds of thousands. We have customers who have over 500 million certificates in management. Right. And having that robust management capabilities is an important component of everything we do, and we make that part of it. So absolutely. Exactly. Good question.
Exactly. So that brings us to the actual use of certificates as part of an operational device. So an operational device, what is one aspect of an operational device, and that's authentication. And it appears in our survey at the beginning that authentication is being adopted by participants in this event. And really, we've seen authentication be adopted in general as one of the major things that's happening to improve cybersecurity. We've seen mutual TLS, mutual authentication be adopted in medical device IoT. So in this diagram, we have a certificate being issued to the device, and then the device being able to use that certificate to authenticate, to do a mutual TLS authentication into some cloud. Now I say IoT cloud here, and I've labeled some clouds as Azure and AWS. But really, this could be the medical device manufacturer's cloud. It could be a cloud service, any cloud service that the device is connecting to, or it could be a service that they're onboarding themselves into within a network. So the point here is that the certificate that the device has been issued enables that device to have a strong authentication into a cloud or into a service. And the CA certificate that issued the certificate is used by the cloud service to verify that it's a valid credential, that the certificate is a valid credential. We've taken this one step further. So I wonder if maybe we should include this polling question with the next one, Mike, about the adoption of the Azure. So we've taken this one step further with Microsoft Azure. So one step is that the device is authenticating into Azure. But a new capability would be that as that device authenticates to Azure for the first time using its birth certificate, Azure would issue it a new certificate, an operational certificate. And this could happen through the Azure Edge client. So the IoT Edge client that Azure provides, it connects to the Azure device provisioning service. The Azure this device provisioning service calls out to your Digicert One account and requests a certificate for that device. And in this way, the device not only is using its birth certificate to enroll into Azure, Azure IoT device provisioning service gives it an operational certificate, and it could have a shorter lifetime of the birth certificate. It could be renewed through a device provisioning service, through the Azure device provisioning service, so that maybe the design, you can adopt a design where it's a 3 or 5 year certificate, or maybe a 3-month certificate. And that as it is needing to be renewed, it's through that Azure IoT Edge client communicating with Azure IoT device provisioning service to obtain a renewed certificate. This is something we're working hard with Microsoft on. We've provided Microsoft with our API endpoints, and and Microsoft Azure IoT device provisioning service are working to integrate into our APIs. The private preview is going on, and Azure have said that they could possibly make this available to the general availability by the end of the year. So it could be available as part of its product by the end of 2021. So what we'd like to do is kind of gauge, there's another poll that we have where we'd like to gauge whether or not a cloud integration is something that's being worked on or being adopted by the participants of the event today, and whether or not this work that we've been doing with Microsoft seems like a valuable solution to you?
So this is, yeah, we had two. We had poll question number 8 and 9. This is 9, so we'll do this quickly.
Great.
Which one are you planning or are you currently using? Give another second. We're not going to share the results of this. We'll talk generally about them. Okay. And then let's end that poll and let's go to question number 8. And then Darren, just from a time check, I know we are just going to briefly talk about code signing. So let's maybe take 5 more minutes and then we'll wrap up.
Yep,
all right, so poll question number 8. Do you have designs for your devices to enroll, connect into a cloud service? Yes or no? Please respond. Couple more seconds. Okay, let's wrap that up. All right, Darren, let's just close on code signing. As I said earlier, there's a dramatic increase in needing code signing. We just want to highlight some important components of good code signing.
Yeah, absolutely. So adopting the signing of code it absolutely helps devices to be robust to the unknown or the unexpected. Signing code allows the device to say, well, I don't expect anything that's not signed. So if it's not signed, I'm not going to run that code. So that's a simple enough concept to say, let's sign our code. But one of the issues that's been highlighted in the news with SolarWinds as an example is that you need to have good policy around what code is signed, protecting keys that are signing code, and just in general that there needs to be a good policy around signing code. One of the things that Digicert 1 is helping with is that protection of the code signing keys and who has access to sign with the keys, because that's one of the major kind of risks when adopting code signing. If the build server has the private key of your code signing certificate, and maybe you're asking a developer to export that and import it into another build server, where that key ends up or where it's being stored, it's really a question for a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, to know if their key has possibly been compromised. Has the code signing key possibly been compromised? So what we've designed is a solution where the key is generated in a Digicert 1 process in Secure Software Manager, and it's protected within an HSM. So the key is generated within an HSM. It's protected there. It's not going to be exported. It can't be exported. And then access to that key is provided only to individuals who should have access to the key. And it's very very well known. It's visible within the software about who has access to which keys. And also it's logged. If a key is used, it's logged that the key was used for providing a signature for code. And also, one of the important aspects of a solution like this is that it integrates with your current build processes. So you don't have to create some kind of software on your own to integrate into your build processes. That's what we are working to do. It's what we've worked to do. So then if I pull up a diagram of what this looks like, all this on the right-hand side, where it says signing and it says Secure Software Manager, we have worked with, we've worked out that signing step so that we've provided tools that normal build processes could happen exactly like they normally would. But what we've done is we've taken over that step of the signing, so that it looks to the build server like it's signing just as it always has. But in reality, the key is not on the build server. The key is not plugged into the build server. The key is off on in the secure software manager within a protected environment, and the hash of the file is sent over to the secure software manager through our tool, through tools that run on that build server, and it interprets what's coming from the build server, that hash that's coming from the build server, and it transfers it over into the to the HSM within Secure Software Manager, and it signs that hash and provides it back. So the important thing to note, just to break it down in very most simplistic way, the build process looks exactly like it always has. And to the build server, it looks like the key is being used exactly like it always is being used. But in reality, the key is being protected in Secure Software Manager, and the usage of that key is being logged within Secure Software Manager. We've seen a lot of excitement around this because it solves that very real challenge. The very real challenge is, where are your keys for code signing? How well are they being protected? Are the keys being exported and lost, or being put into high risk type environments where they could be compromised? And what is being signed by those keys? Is there a log of what's being signed by those keys that you can look at centrally to find out what's being signed? So this is the solution that we have at Secure Software Manager, and we're really excited about this because it's helping companies adopt code signing and protect their keys in a robust way.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Darren. I think that, you look at what happened with SolarWinds. SolarWinds signed a firmware update that had malware in it. They used a valid code signing certificate. So it wasn't the signing certificate. And to all of you who are practicing code signing, hats off to you. But we've seen a lot of organizations practice code signing, but do it in a way that exposes the private key, that has no control over rights management. So having the ability to control who can sign what, when they can sign, having auditability, reportability, even things like key rotation is an important thing. And Secure Software Manager doesn't just allow you to sign and do that in a way, it controls the processes that oftentimes organizations overlook and where they stumble. And it's a built-in automated platform that helps put in place the process controls to make sure that you're not setting yourself up for risk. So thank you, Darren. Thanks for running through that. We're now at the conclusion of the event. Darren, if you just advance to the slide. As I mentioned at the top of the call, we're really excited to offer you this incentive, 2-month free trial with support. This would be one of our sales engineer support team who can help walk you through, set up workflows, get your hands on the technology. We've shown some really cool stuff, the flexibility of our platform today. We want you to get your hands on it, to play with it, test it out, see if it's as cool as we've touted it to be. And then as an additional incentive, we're also offering to waive startup costs, which is the creation of a root for your organization or an ICA. If you're an existing customer, you're looking to expand, that could be a new ICA for a new business unit that has a need, including the trial. So we'll follow up with you who are on the call today on how to take advantage of this. Thank you so much for your time today and spending this time with Darren and I to talk through some of the emerging trends and challenges that we see through the lens of PKI in healthcare. Thank you so much, Darren. Thanks for your great presentation. And again, thanks to everybody for taking time out of your busy days. We hope you have a great remainder of your afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.